It's time for health tips. Now here's your host, Dr. Alma Jenkins.
Good evening. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Dr. Alma Jenkins, and this is Health Tips. You know, we are always honored to come into your homes on Saturday nights, and I hope that you're bringing friends to watch with you, maybe pop some corn, just make a little 30 minutes of it. But we're so honored to come into your homes on Saturday nights. I'd like to first start by reminding you that we would love to hear from you. Some of you have probably tweaked some of our recipes with your own rendition of it. Let us know what you've done. We'd love to see what recipe you have. You might have something that you think is just so delicious and you'd like us to try it. And we'd want to give you credit for it on the show. So just write to us at the station and send us whatever you have, or if you want us to talk to your church or your group, let us know. We'd be happy to come. Also, I want to remind you that we want you to keep exercising. We do it at the end of our shows as much as we can, but I don't know if you're doing it consistently. Are you? I run into some of you at the grocery store, at the wherever I am out and about, and you tell me that you're watching the show. And my next question is always, but are you exercising too? And sometimes I'll hear you say yes, that you're lifting your cans. But remember that you need to keep moving. You have to keep it moving. And that's going to keep your joints mobile, and that's going to help the longevity of your bones. All right? So what are we going to talk about tonight? I want to talk about something that I think sometimes we take for granted, and that is going to the doctor, a proper visit, some of the things that you need to do at your visit. So I took a minute to write some things down, and I hope you can see this. One of the reasons I'm going into this is because now when you go to the doctor, everything is so timed right now. I'll bet your physician probably has a certain number of patients that they've scheduled to see that day. And oftentimes, if it's a follow-up visit, you're not a new patient, you came in, you're following up from something else, you probably have a good 10-15 minute slot, maybe 20 minutes, depending on what the problem is. If it's a physical exam, now you have more time. You might even have 30 minutes for, a physical, or maybe even longer for a physical. But if you're a routine follow-up, you probably don't have more than about 15 minutes slotted for you to see the doctor. So you know what? You've got to be concise about what you are feeling. So let's say that you have a thyroid issue, and last week they drew blood, and he adjusted your medicine, and now it's your follow-up visit. And let's say in between that, you noticed that your heart was pumping fast, or you were feeling palpitations, and you were concerned about that, and maybe you even had some chest pain. You know what you need to do? You need to get a little notepad and jot that down, that this is what you felt. Because you may get in the office and forget, or you may get distracted, and you may end up saying it in bits and pieces. Maybe you're saying it when the physician is trying to examine you. That's not a good time, because he's focusing on, or she is focusing on, what they're hearing when they listen to the heart, the lungs. So when you go in and the doctor walks in and sits down, you need to go ahead and state your problem. Well, doctor, I felt some fluttering in my heart this time, or whatever the problem is. Try and get that said fairly concisely. Now, if you have trouble with your memory, or younger people, if that's grandmother and you know that she has a hard time remembering some things, jot it down for her and go with her and help her with that, so that all the problems get addressed that they have time to address that day. And if it's a thyroid visit, that's probably mainly what they're going to talk about. But if there are other issues and you can state them concisely, the doctor might be able to address an issue or two more, or they may reschedule another visit to bring you back so that they can talk about whatever the other issue is. Okay? So you're going to state your problem, number one. Number two, carry notes or carry notes, a notepad. Let me just change that. Carry a notepad. And when I say carry notes, I mean notes from what you've written down before you came, and you want to make sure you say that to the doctor. But to make it more concise, let me say carry a notepad. And that way you can have the stuff you wrote in there, plus whatever the doctor tells you, you might want to jot it down so that you don't forget it. Excuse me. Something made me sneeze. Okay? And then you want to bring your medicines. Bring your meds with you. I know you say, well, you've got it written down. We do. But you know, sometimes some patients have trouble knowing which ones we're talking about. For instance, if I say Nexium, they may not realize which one that is, the little purple pill. Okay, and we don't always call them by their color. So a good idea, if you don't know your medicines in terms of the names of them and which ones they are, bring them with you. And then that way there's no mistaking what the doctor is talking about. And if you get it, and if you can remember this, ladies and gentlemen, when you go to the doctor, review your meds with the doctor. Just, you know, if they don't remember to do it, just say, am I going to stay on the same medicines? Doctor, would you take a minute to look at my medicines to tell me if you think I need to make any changes? You know, I'll give you an example. A patient came to us the other day, and this was a patient who was having problems with anxiety. And they were telling me this story because this doesn't pertain to my specialty that I deal with. But the patient was just letting me know that they were anxious, had some depression issues, and had been prescribed Ambien for sleep. Well, the patient already had Zoloft, and the doctor prescribed some Paxil as well. And they were confused about whether to add that to what they already had or should they leave off one. They just didn't know what to do because somehow that point wasn't made clear in the office. So whenever you're given a new medicine, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you understand whether you are adding that to the medicines that you already have, or whether this is a substitute for something, or whether they are taking away something and adding the new medicine. Many patients have been harmed by taking too much medicine because they thought that they were to take whatever they were taking plus what the doctor gave them, when in fact that medicine was to replace something that they were taking. You understand? So always try and get your physician to, and usually we try and do that, especially primary care physicians, go over your medicines to tell you if this is an addition or if this is whatever this is. Now with gastroenterology, very often we're not dealing with your other medicines. We're specifically dealing with the stomach medicines. So we'll generally talk about those. Now, if by chance the stomach medicines interfere with something you're already on, then that should be told to you. And I'll give you an example for those of you who, I don't have an eraser here right now, but let me just give you an example of something that those of you who are on this medicine can know about. Okay. Let me go, I'm going to skip all the way down to the bottom. My producer is giving me something. Thank you so much. Let me just erase this for a minute. Those of you out there who are heart patients, how many of you are heart patients? Of course, I can't see you raise your hand, but I know there are quite a few because remember, heart disease is the most common illness we deal with in this country and probably around the world. But those of you who are heart patients and you're on blood thinners, but you also have reflux, okay? Well, one of the thinners, it's not as much of a thinner as, say, Coumadin. We call them antiplatelet medicines. But one of the medicines that kind of thins your blood a little bit is Plavix. Now, a lot of you are on Plavix. So if you're on Plavix, but you've got reflux, then the reflux medicine, and there are different medicines you can be on, okay? But things like, there's like Zantac, we don't do as much of that as we used to. There's a lot of people are no longer on Tagamet because it's good medicine, but in terms of how it blends with other medicines, sometimes it can interact not well with some other meds. That's a different class of medicine. Most people now are on what we call PPIs. You may see this term, PPI. That stands for proton pump inhibitor. Now, what are those medicines? Proton pump inhibitors, which is what we use a lot of now, are the following. Let our board dry a little bit. Proton pump inhibitors are drugs like Nexium, Protonix, Acifex, okay, Dexilant. See, these are all proton pump inhibitors. The proton pump in your stomach is what makes the acid, okay? So these will cut your acid production. But if you're on Plavix, what is said now in the literature suggests that this is the one, when you have a choice, this is the one you should be on because it will not interfere with the action of Plavix. Whereas there is a question about whether these other ones will interfere with the action of Plavix. Okay? Now there's some discussion back and forth about that. So until that clears, you might want to prefer that you be on Protonix if you're on Plavix. Okay? So that you feel more comfortable that it's not interfering with the action of Plavix. Now these are the proton pump inhibitors. These aren't all of them. There's Prevacid. Also, I forgot to put that. Prevacid. Okay? So these are a list of what we call proton pump inhibitors. So that's just something for you to be aware of, is that of those drugs, Protonix is the one that's thought to go best with Plavix, okay? So, you know, that's just a good little point to know in case you're on it. Now, it doesn't mean the others don't work or that you might not even be doing fine on the others, but technically, that's what the literature is suggesting at this point. Okay, so that's generally what I advise on my patients when they come in and they're on Plavix. I'll usually choose Protonix if I have to use one. But now that information is, I'm sure, is being looked at and may change. And I don't think it's a major issue either way, but we don't want your Plavix not to work well, because you're on it for some very important reasons. So that's just something to know. So what are you going to do when you go to the doctor? One, you're going to try to formulate your question. Think about what's happened since you saw them last. And if you notice there's a problem, you're going to state that problem. Number two, you're going to carry a notepad so you can write down, you can have your question already written down to remind you. And then when your doctor tells you the answer or answers it, you can jot down the pertinent points that you want to remember. Now, on some of the software in the offices now, there's an opportunity for the doctor to actually write down in the note what they want you to remember. We have that on our software, for instance, that we can actually give the patient a copy of what we've gone over that day and what we want you to remember and that sort of thing. But not all offices have that. So you may need to just jot down some things as best you remember them. Okay? And then remember, we said bring your medicine, the actual bottles if you can. Now I know some of you are on a lot of medicine, but some of you know your medicines pretty well, and you know what color the pills are, and you know which one is what. So that's fine. You can bring a list of your medicine, and you're fine because you know what the doctor's talking about. But many of you don't. So just bring your bottles, and that cuts all the confusion down. And we can say, look, I want you to take this medicine and, take half of it, or don't take this one. You know exactly what we're talking about. Okay? So that cuts down on a lot of confusion. Now, having said that, many of you come in and you have 5 or 6 problems that you want to talk about during that visit. And sometimes in the interest of time, it's not possible to do that. But still jot it down, and if the physician says, okay, we'll discuss that at the next visit, or we want to schedule another appointment, that's fine as long as it's not too far off, or if it's something pressing, just make sure you make that point known. Yes, doc, but I've been short of breath. Now that's a different thing. We have to talk about that today if you come in complaining of shortness of breath. So whatever it is that's most pressing to you, get that in when you sit down. Go ahead and let the physician know what it is that's a problem to you. Here's a good one though. If you don't understand what the doctor said, don't walk away as if you do. Say, I didn't understand that. Can you explain it to me a little bit more? And sometimes even the nurse can explain it to you, if it's something very basic. But try to have an understanding before you leave the office about the directions that you've been given. Now, one thing in particular I want to caution patients who are getting ready to get a colonoscopy, especially. So let's talk about patients who are getting ready for procedure. Many of you out there you're going to be prepping this weekend for a colonoscopy on Monday, aren't you? So I want you to be good and clean. So there are some things you need to remember if you're a patient who's being prepped for a procedure. Number 1, drink all of it. Now I know many of you will say, I'm clean because I've had diarrhea. I'm clear because the last little bit was clear, so I don't need to drink the rest of it. No, you need to drink all of it because the right side of the colon takes longer to come out of you. And that's often where all the dirty stool is when we do colonoscopies. So you need to drink all of it. Number 2, you need to drink it quickly. About a glass every 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe a glass every 10 minutes at least, okay? Because if you sip on it and drink it, take all night to drink it, doesn't work as well. Just doesn't. So drink it quickly. Number 3, generally the day before your procedure, you're on clear liquids. What are clear liquids? Anything you can see through. So if you're going to have chicken broth, make it broth. Don't have noodles in it. Don't eat a sandwich. It really is whatever you can see through. So we're talking broth, apple juice, anything clear. Sprite, clear sodas. I don't recommend sodas, but if you're going to do that, Gatorade. We usually like you to avoid any red substances, red Jello, red Kool-Aid. Try to avoid that because it looks like blood in the colon. So we don't want to run into that. Okay? So this is part of understanding what you're being told at the office. Usually if you're going to have a colonoscopy, you're given a prep sheet so that you don't have to remember everything. It's written down for you. Now, those of you who are diabetics, you need to get an understanding of which medicines to take before you leave home, if any. because you're not eating. So we don't want you to bottom out. There are special instructions for diabetics, so ask about that. Those of you who are on Coumadin and blood thinners, we usually want to stop those 5 to 7 days before. Those of you who are on other types of blood thinners, be sure you ask about that, okay? Now, those of you who are on blood pressure medicine, usually if it's a colonoscopy, at least at our institution, we suggest they take their blood pressure medicine with a sip of water, and because we don't want that pressure getting out of hand. So we usually recommend that, but do ask about it. Ask your doctor, especially if you have a problem like that. Those of you who are heart patients, if you've had chest pain, you've had angina, be sure to let your doctor know that, because we don't want to stress you with a colonoscopy if you're having active angina, okay? So these are just some precautions that I want you to remember, those of you who are gastroenterology patients. But just in general, we talked about what to do at a doctor's visit. Now, special note to those of you who are pretty ill. You know, you have some serious illnesses going on. You have several things. You may be diabetic, have heart condition, have kidney problems, and all of this. Have a power of attorney. Really, we all need to, at some point in our lives, consider having a power of attorney. That's the person who's going to make decisions for you should you not be able to. So we're talking about the power of attorney, POA, okay? And you need to think about that. Those of you who have grandparents or your parents, those of us who are older, we need to think about who our power of attorney is going to be and try and get that straight while we can think about it and while we are physically able to do that, okay? So I hope this is helpful to you somewhat. I hope that it makes your next doctor's visit more effective, that you will get more out of that visit. You'll be able to process what the doctor says because you came in, you stated your problem, you had a little notepad, you could jot things down, and that includes asking questions about what the doctor said, and you might even have thought of some questions about your last visit that you wanted to bring up. So I hope that helps make your visit more effective, because we do want you to have an effective doctor's visit and feel like when you leave there that you got something from that visit. You know, we don't want you feeling like you just rushed in and you were rushed out. We want you to feel that you got what you came for. All right? And pay attention to your vital signs. What was your blood pressure? How much did you weigh? How many of you are paying attention to your weight? We're getting a lot of problems with patients gaining as they're coming in, and we're trying to get you to lose. So we're paying attention to your body mass index now. And remember that your body, 30 is kind of your BMI. It's generally recommended that it not be over 30. Okay? That's kind of the magic number. We don't want it over 30. So there are many of you out there, your BMI is like 40 plus. Okay? That means you're really overweight. So let's look at that. And most offices now are doing weights, and they can often tell you what your BMI is. The software that we have now in our office, for instance, lets us know when patients are over 30 BMI. It also prompts us to ask patients about their social habits, smoking, for instance, and drinking, but particularly smoking. It prompts us to ask if you smoke. And so you're going to find now that when you go into the doctor's office, you're being asked some questions that maybe you weren't asked so much in the past. You may have been asked it at your physical, but you might not have gotten asked that anymore. Now we're being prompted to bring that up and to remind you, because we're trying to do more preventive medicine than we were doing. Okay, so I hope you remember all of that. And as usual, we want to do some exercise before we leave because we've got What, about 5 minutes left? Actually, 2 minutes. We've got only 2 minutes left. My, how time goes when you're having fun. So let's do a little bit, and you can continue to do this when we're done. 1, 2, ready, and 1, and 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 8, 9, and 10, 11, let's do 15, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Woo, you know, I feel that in my arms right now. Okay. All right, so let's do some boxing. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 8, 9, and 10. 2, 3, 4, 1, and 2, 3, and 4, 5. Come on, do this. And 6. Do this with me. 7, and 8, and 9, and 10. 2, 3, 4. I know you can do this with me for the last minute of the show. We only have about a minute left. So let's just stretch our arms out, and let's hold it out to the count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And let's just take a good deep breath right now. Deep breath in, hold it, and let it out. Deep breath in. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I'm Dr. Alma Jenkins. See you next time. Good night.